When Jurassic Park was released, we got a look at the first truly terrifying dinosaurs in cinema, the Velociraptors, which were portrayed as cunning pack hunters with deadly sickle claws. Then, not so long after, we got our first glimpse of the real apex predators in the Lost World, the Tyrannosaurs, or as they're sometimes nicknamed, the Tyrant Kings. A box office-worthy villain that enjoyed the perks of a massive skull with bone-crushing teeth, but still retaining a surprising level of intelligence, powerful legs for pursuit, and perhaps the hardest to miss, a bite force that would put a hydraulic press to shame. And while it may be the most famous of all predators, this iconic killer certainly wasn't the most disturbing, despite being absolutely massive. And it's no mystery why T-Rex gets all the attention, as the king of dinosaurs was pretty much designed to be the ultimate predator. But as it so turns out, we don't have to imagine what would happen if you took everything scary about a T-Rex and made it somehow worse. Just a really, really long time ago, about 17 million years ago to be exact.
As it was then during the Cretaceous that a family of theropods emerged who were strikingly similar in size to the T-Rex, but were in some ways even more twisted, and arguably more savage. These were the Abelisaurids. Like the T-Rex, this group is shrouded in mystery and controversy thanks to their bizarre fossil record. And to date, researchers can't even agree on how they hunted, or what made them so successful. But there is no argument that they would have made for the perfect horror movie monsters, as each one followed the same nightmarish body plan, which included this. What you're seeing here isn't some genetic mistake or fossilization error, but a skull of all things. And it belonged to the Carnotaurus, the holotype for the subfamily, and the most complete Abelisaurid to be discovered in Argentina before the turn of the millennium. And as its name suggests, paleontologists thought they had originally found some kind of meat-eating bull based on its massive horns, which they believed to have been used for combat. However, we now know that these horns were just the beginning of what made this animal terrifying, and that it possessed features that measured up to 8 meters or 26 feet, making it about the same length as the largest polar bears in existence.
Or just as long as your typical delivery truck. This also meant that Carnotaurus literally had the most bizarre combination of features of any large predator ever, a title that would only be challenged by none other than one of its own, as over the next 3 decades, many new genera belonging to this family were discovered, with a few being even stranger than their predecessor. And now the total number of Abelisaurids sits at 40 different genera. And crazily enough, these additional discoveries wound up teaching us that Carnotaurus's body plan was somehow much more deadly than first thought, as these theropods didn't just have powerful legs, but the fastest legs, as their limb proportions show adaptations that were just like those of modern cursorial animals, i.e. shockingly built for speed and very specialized. And what's crazy is that their speed was likely even higher in real life, as they were most likely using tendons and muscles that might have added an additional 30% in power. And now, while the arms did not have giant claws like other predators, they were still bizarre and mysterious. But what made these bodies truly unsettling wasn't only their shape and structure, but also what backed them up, so to speak. As Abelisaurids had robust and proportionately thick skulls that would have given theropods like the Allosaurus some pretty major design envy. These skulls were covered in thick osteoderms, and the bones were constructed in a way that made them durable and highly reinforced, allowing them to freely slam their weapons around with force, and letting them be used as either a battering ram or club depending on how they were feeling, which in both cases would lead to catastrophic bone fractures and massive internal trauma. And even the survival of the victim wouldn't have stopped the Abelisaurs' onslaught, since researchers think the Abelisaurids likely used their heads to bulldoze carcasses and flip bodies over, allowing them to access hard-to-reach meat and dismember their food. Now at this point I could stop here and still have it be plenty clear on why it would suck to be hunted by Abelisaurs. Yet this isn't the full picture. Oh no. As to truly understand the extent of their brutality, we have to talk about prey capture strategy. You see, if a dinosaur was small enough, it's thought that Abelisaurids would have hunted it by using devastating head strikes and bites to bring it down, before crushing their victim into smaller, swallowable pieces. This sounds bad enough. However, this is actually the lesser of two evils. As for larger dinosaurs, including what would be elephant-sized ones, the Abelisaurids did something much more unpleasant. They would first chase their prey, catch them, and bite them like a bear trap with their giant jaws, and then while they were still possibly alive, shake them.
Kind of like a dog with a chew toy, only that the toy is alive, has been clamped, and is definitely screaming. We know this is a possibility as Abelisaurids all had hyperflexible and well-developed necks that were unlike anything seen in most predators, implying incredible rotational force and the ability to whip things sideways with devastating power. And despite not being as precise as other predatory dinosaurs, their mouths were no joke either, and in some ways were actually more interesting. Because, unlike most predators that have similar skulls to their relatives, the Abelisaurids had vastly different ones among them, each seeming to take inspiration from other notorious creatures. For example, the Majuncosaurus had a skull similar to those seen in big cats, being broad and having a shortened snout. Meanwhile, the Scorpiovenator's skull was deep and narrow of all things. It got weirder though, as others such as Alcosaurus and Carnotaurus had skulls more like modern monitors and constrictors, with the upper jaw being flexible and designed to swallow. And the variations continued with the Equirxenosaurus, who might have had the most visually imposing skull of them all, with its massively robust and tank-like construction which highly resembled the Tyrannosaur, who, as you may know, is rather well known for possessing devastating bite force. Now, what's interesting is that studies have shown that Abelisaurids probably couldn't see very well or track movement with that much precision.
But given just how efficiently designed their bodies were, that wasn't really an issue to having a deadly lifestyle, especially when you remember that the legs already had more than enough pursuit potential as it was. It's here in the legs that the Abelisaurids also arguably get a win over the T-Rex, because despite the T-Rex's legs looking kind of powerful, they were quite heavy and designed more for endurance rather than bursts of speed. And nature's own monstrosities take the prize in velocity as well. Because of all the members we know of, the fastest would have been the Carnotaurus, an Argentinian genus who weighed 2 tons and measured 8 meters or 26 feet, nearly identical to the size of a large Allosaurus. But the crazy thing is that this is actually considered to be on the medium size for this family, not large, as they could get much bigger. In fact, nearly half of the Abelisaurids were larger than a Carnotaurus, with the Pycnonemosaurus, Abelisaurus, and the Rajasaurus all being over 9 meters in length. And at this size, some of them were the sole apex predators in their environment. And a few achieved some even more impressive feats, as currently the largest predator from Madagascar is thought to have been an Abelisaurid, a fitting animal for an island well known for their bizarre wildlife. Still, it wasn't in Madagascar that you would find the speediest member, far from it. As to meet a real runner, you'd have had to travel back to late Cretaceous Argentina.
Where if you were seriously unlucky, you would have encountered the Carnotaurus. Yes, you heard that right, the Carnotaurus. Let me tell you, this somewhat famous-sounding name does not get enough credit, as in reality, nothing about this demonic theropod was normal, especially for its prey. Not only was it the fastest member in its family, but it was also a massive theropod in general, with recovered bones suggesting speeds of up to 35 miles per hour or 56 kilometers per hour, faster than any large theropod ever discovered. At this speed, Carnotaurus was no doubt the quickest and deadliest theropod in Argentina, and it likely preyed upon pretty much everything, including a variety of titanosaurs, hadrosaurs, and ankylosaurs. It might have even been able to chase down smaller ornithopods, the Gasparinissara, by using its massive speed to overtake them, while its skull could then be used to deliver devastating impact. And while no complete skeleton belonging to other beasts has been found yet, researchers estimate, based on their closest relatives, that they were at least equally terrifying, giving them the title of the predators with the strangest adaptations, even when including fictional monsters in the running. And this is a notion that is adequately reflected by their distribution, which, while may not sound impressive in books, actually has a very sinister meaning, as it references a dominance across the southern hemisphere that lasted through sheer brutality.
So yeah, walking through a forest clearing and seeing one of these guys, or really any Abelisaurid for that matter, would have been a spine-chilling moment. But what might really stop your heart is seeing one start to charge. Because the moment it lowered its head, you'd suddenly realise that they were much more aggressive than they should have been. And there's a reason for that.
Many dinosaurs have reinforced or thickened skulls, meaning they were built for impact, but in Abelisaurids this reinforcement was taken to an extreme level. So extreme that only one other theropod is known to rival their thickness, and that's the Pachycephalosaurus. And what's interesting is that all of their skulls possess this characteristic, but the frontal bones, horns, and orbital regions were especially thick, which together made them very dangerous for their sizes. For example, the Carnotaurus was only around 2 tons, while a T-Rex of similar length might have been 300% heavier. And it got even crazier than this, as some like the Velocisaurus might have been no more than 15 kilos or 33 pounds, despite being over 1.5 meters or 5 feet in length. Which leads some paleontologists to think that certain genera were the cheetahs of their time. This surprising lightness helped turn this group into very agile and speedy killers, kind of like prehistoric battering rams with biological helmets.
And would have let even the larger ones chase down prey faster than themselves and stage devastating charges. Not to mention, they also had tailbones that were relatively flexible and similar in construction to those seen in ornithomimids, implying yet again more adaptations meant for turning. And no surprise, such a design worked wonderfully, to the misfortune of others. But unfortunately for them, these others could even include themselves, as fossil records have shown. Specifically, a Majungasaurus specimen, a Madagascan genus, was found with severely damaged skull bones, which is thought to have originated from multiple different impact marks on the side of its skull that, lo and behold, matched the horns found on its own head, meaning it came from a rival. The extent of the damage was so severe that the team who studied the skull believed that there is a greater than 50% chance that the individual engaged in regular combat. But it is this aggressive attitude combined with its build that ultimately allowed the Abelisaurids to establish an expansive dominion, with species being known from 4 different continents: Africa, Asia, Europe, and South America, with Argentina, Madagascar, India, and France having been strongholds from members in these regions. If you wanted to avoid running into one of these real-life battering rams, you would have needed to steer clear from any open plains, as Abelisaurids typically lived in dry environments,
namely savanna areas and semi-deserts where prey would have been visible and exposed. There's even some speculation that some members may have opportunistically hunted in coordinated groups, such as mated pairs, family units, and loose aggregations. In fact, once upon a time, paleontologists actually thought that hunting in groups was really the Abelisaurid's main way of acquiring food, with the idea that they used their speed to herd prey into ambushes. But nowadays, based on all their other adaptations, it's believed to be an unlikely story, and there's near universal agreement that they were simply terrestrial hunters who were many times the most specialized predators in their environment. However, this wasn't always the case, and fossil records indicate that they had quite the rivalry with other large theropods, who were sometimes even bigger and specialized to tackle different prey. This competition took place mainly in South America, and during it, the Abelisaurids preferred to play into their speed and aggression, since it was only after the extinction of Carcharodontosaurids 90 million years ago that they underwent a rapid diversification. But funnily enough, despite their competition with the Carcharodontosaurs, they coincidentally shared a similar geographical range and timeline, leading to some thinking that the two had comparable ecological roles. Now, admittedly, Carcharodontosaurids are no Carnotaurus when it comes to speed, but they have been compared to lions, who despite misconceptions can actually be quite fast,
and are known to occasionally sprint, coordinate, and even once in a while steal kills from other predators. So that's all to say, if any of this rubbed off on the Carcharodontosaurids and thereby Abelisaurids, neighbouring herbivores would have been in for quite the nasty surprise. Despite this shared similarity and the two's close but separate relationship, Abelisaurids are currently believed not to be closely related to the Carcharodontosaurids. And actually, everyone really knows what these enigmatic killers were related to. Obviously, they have their own family, but to which group of theropods they evolved from is well understood. As their name suggests, originally paleontologists thought they were related to Tyrannosaurids, but this has since been discarded since they don't have similar arm structures. Then they thought that Abelisaurids are part of the Ceratosauria, given the similar primitive features, and that actually stuck. And since then, 2 new schools of thought have emerged, with one side believing them to be early ceratosaurs, meaning their closest relatives were possibly Ceratosaurus,
Or they were simply derived ceratosaurs, which tells us quite a bit actually. And the mystery surrounding this group doesn't end with classification, as we also now know where they came from. Currently the best evidence is that they originated in South America, possibly during the middle days of the Jurassic. From there, they wound up in Africa sometime in the early Cretaceous.
After that, they ended up doing very well and became highly successful, eventually carrying on their conquest to Europe and Asia, likely arriving there via land bridges. So quite the conquerors on top of being the perfect pursuit predators. And actually they were so good at being hunters and simply existing that you could make the argument that Abelisaurid traits were more effective than what other theropods had. Because if you compare this group's survival time against others, it's basically a clean sweep. For example, Tyrannosaurids achieved an existence of about 16 million years, Spinosaurids 46, Carcharodontosaurids 64, Megalosaurids 25 million, and you get the idea. Meanwhile, the Abelisaurids clocked an existence spanning over 95 million years, making them among the longest-lived dinosaur groups, period. And opposed to some animals that tend to get less specialized through time, it seems that they only got more extreme and more overpowered, as the last iterations and surviving members happen to be the fastest and arguably the most specialized. And of course, I'm talking about the Carnotaurus itself. And when you have a family as successful as this, it really makes you wonder, how did they even go extinct? Well, it turns out that Mother Nature herself couldn't get the job done. Because like the non-avian dinosaurs as a whole, the Abelisaurids were only wiped out after a giant meteor slammed into the Earth 66 million years ago, bringing an end to all non-avian dinosaurs and the last of the Abelisaurids. And to this day, we're still waiting for a new animal to pop up that has adaptations even close to as extreme as theirs. Thanks for watching, and until next time.